All right, let's get right to it. On the phone with us is Shaun Livingston, former Golden State Warrior, NBA champion. Shaun, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, here's what we're doing. Steve Kerr is he's been the coach of the Golden State Warriors now for 10 years. We're kind of taking a look back at his tenure, and we thought you'd be a great person to talk to. And here I'm going to jump right in here. When your first year with the Warriors was also Steve Kerr's first year of the Warriors. And if I remember correctly, he was trying to implement a new offense because he was a new coach and trying to put the open offense in. Do you remember that? Do you remember how he went about doing it? And were you aware, and how aware was the team that they were embarking on something new offensively?
Yeah, I do remember that. It was our first year coaching. It was our first year together. It was his first year, coaching the team. I believe he coached the summer league team just to kind of prep. I'm not sure how much that got him ready, for the job. But, I just remember, my experience coming in and just, being impressed with his communication skills and his level of awareness. That's what, to me, really stood out. Anytime there's a transition, that was like my 9th or 10th NBA team that I had played on. So, I was kind of used to that adjustment, right? Of like knowing, as a player, if you're going from team to team, there's always going to be adjustments. There's new plays, there's new players, new coaches, new people. For him to come in after the level of success that the Warriors had under Mark Jackson, and with that core group, I believe they had the same starters and the same, maybe 2 or 3 new guys on the team, me and Barbosa, maybe another player. I was just impressed with his level of awareness and how he was able to kind of communicate his values and his principles and philosophies as a coach without, throwing dirt on, Mark Jackson and his coaching staff and the last leadership. It's very hard for, to build trust when you have new guys coming in, new people kind of thrown into the mix. And for him to kind of, come in and really galvanize the team and put his stamp on it right away. I was impressed how he was able to kind of communicate that, from the top down. So that's what I remember.
Well, Shaun, you spoke about at that point having played for the amount of teams you did. Obviously, you played for different head coaches as well. You signed a 3-year deal at the beginning of that with the Golden State Warriors. Was Steve Kerr, firstly, a part of the pitch from the front office to try and court you to Golden State? And then secondly, was there any skepticism you had about Steve Kerr as someone who had never been a head coach before in the NBA?
100%. 100%. Track record, means a lot anywhere in any industry, right? But especially, professional basketball in the NBA. Yes, there was definitely skepticism. I didn't really know Steve. The only interaction I had with him was his time as a general manager with the Phoenix Suns. And that was when I was with the Clippers. So we're talking, 10 years before I had even got to Golden State. So, always a little bit of skepticism, going to play for a new coach. And, I think initially, we were all a bit skeptical, but, again, just being able to break that, being able to break through some of those barriers, starting with Steph, starting with, Andre Iguodala. Those were the team captains at the time. The vets really gaining that trust and then allowing it to trickle down. But he wasn't necessarily a part of the pitch to bring me in, but I know he was part of the group that was vouching and going to bat for me during free agency. I remember him, Bob Myers, Jerry West. Those were the 3 main, kind of say recruiters, but those were the 3 main voices that, that were interested in me at the time.
Shaun Livingston joining us on 95.7 The Game, three-time NBA champion with the Golden State Warriors. Why did you come to Golden State? Because they'd been eliminated in the first round the year before you got there, and it wasn't like you were ring chasing at the time. Why did you choose Golden State?
Yeah, I mean, for me, at that point in my career, I wanted to win, and I wanted to play competitive basketball. I mean, I didn't have the big contract. I missed out on that with my injuries, so I was fighting and clawing, but I felt that I could contribute at a high level, to a winning team. And that was my mission. For me, it was like, all right, I'm playing on a lot of losing teams. Can I just catch a break? Can I just get to around some talent, around, a winning culture? Because I felt like I was a component. I was kind of a cog in a wheel, if you will. Wasn't a star player, wasn't necessarily a starter at the time. I was starting in Brooklyn before I got to Golden State, but that was kind of, injuries that happened and whatnot. So listen, I wanted to play in the playoffs, man. It's simple. Like, that's kind of the best time of sports, of basketball, is, the tournament, the playoffs, March Madness, right? When it's all on the line. And I missed that. My only experience was my second year in the NBA. I was 20. I didn't get back to the playoffs till I was 28 with Brooklyn. And so at 29, I'm like, listen, there's these other teams that are recruiting me. They're kind of a long ways out. You got Golden State with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, the Splash Brothers, right? They're on the rise. You got veterans and Andrew Bogut. I played with him in Milwaukee. I grew up with Andre Iguodala, know him. The shoe seemed to fit. And it was an opportunity for me to play on a competitive team. Did we think that we were going to win the championship our first year? I don't think anybody, just knew that was going to happen. But I think we saw the opportunity as being, all right, we get into the playoffs, we can really do some damage, and we can see how far we can take this thing.
Well, Shaun, one of the things that is attached to Kerr all the time is the label of his communication skills. I mean, you touched on it off the top, how clear of a communicator he was with you from the beginning, and his ability to manage relationships, or, perhaps when you guys acquired Durant, the amount of stars that you had on that team, being able to manage, and at sometimes seamlessly, other times, kind of quell some things. Is there a story or an experience that you can recall that sort of encapsulates Steve Kerr, the communicator, and that skill set that we know him for?
Yeah. I mean, I think you just look at the big rotation changes, with two former All-Stars and David Lee and Andre Iguodala. You got a situation to where, David Lee is really kind of the main component of what the Warriors were building. With Steph Curry, David Lee, I think he was the first All-Star, right? Before Steph was even an All-Star. So you look at that situation, and David gets hurt early in training camp, maybe before training camp. Draymond Green is coming into the fold, kind of an up-and-coming player, but, by no means really expected to be a superstar, right? His second-round draft pick, his third year in the league. So he kind of comes and just really takes the spot right away, and the team just takes off. How do you deal with the egos, right, of having someone like David Lee, who's, I don't know if he was on a max contract then, maybe close, but, he's definitely on an all-star caliber contract. He's looked at as an all-star player. Now he's expected to come off the bench. You're talking about taking away some of his minutes. You're talking about, I don't think it was a contract year for him, but again, just that whole situation, I think he was maybe 31, 32 at the time. So looking at it from that standpoint of getting another contract, same goes with Andre Iguodala, right? I mean, these guys are 30, 31, mature players, veteran players, guys who, have made a name for themselves in the NBA, have made a name for themselves in the league, have a reputation. So how do you manage those egos? How do you manage that, those relationships throughout the locker room, not just with the coach, but also from player to player. And I think that's the power, of Steve Kerr. Bob Myers, obviously, But Steve was on the ground dealing with it, and he had to deal with putting out some of the fires. It helps to win. I will say that, winning helps. But Steve, I think, his superpower is his emotional intelligence. Obviously, a smart human being, but someone who cares about human beings, right? So he's able to kind of, see through, he's able to kind of read players. He has great feel, and, he's able to get ahead of maybe some of the fires before they start, building up tension in the room. He can communicate, what's actually happening, maybe the vision, and why he's making some of his decisions, even, whether a player deserves it or not. I think that's another thing. It's not just, those two guys. It's kind of a 1 through 15 situation to where he's, trying to constantly think about a player, their role on the team, their career, right? Like, not just being there in Golden State, but, hey, like, I'd love to play 10, 15 years. It might not be here, but is this a situation to where, I can get a contract somewhere else one day, right? So, he's just aware. He has great awareness, great feel, and I think that's contributed to his success as a coach.
Shaun Livingston joining us on 95.7 The Game, three-time champ for the Golden State Warriors. We're talking about Steve Kerr. Hey, one thing I always seem to remember, and you tell me if I'm remembering it right. So the Warriors would run their open offense and motion, whatever you want to call it, with ball movement and player movement. Did you have a special play where you could post up? Because you're the one guy I remember posting up during those years, probably more than any other player.
My play was give me the damn ball on the block. You know where I'm gonna be. You know where I'm gonna be at. So if I'm floating out there in the 3-point line, that's fine. You ain't got to pass to me. But if you see me on that block, you can just throw the ball down there because I'm not moving.
Shaun, you ever thought about coaching? You sound like you got the demeanor for it.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day. Not today, but maybe one day.
All right. Hey, Shaun, really appreciate you giving us your time and giving us some great insight on Steve Kerr. Really appreciate it. And we had Otto Porter Jr. on earlier, and I told him that the Bay Area thinks very fondly of him, and obviously the Bay Area loves you too, and your role in those championship teams.
Yeah, the Bay will always be a second home. Some of the best fans in the world. It's a special place. So I really appreciate that.
Sure, appreciate it, man. That's Shaun Livingston. Thank you so much.